Welcome back to the TCK Diaries. I'm Shira.
And I'm Elsie.
And today we're diving into what it really means to be a third culture kids, our struggles, our perks, and the things that make us feel both at home and out of place.
If you've ever felt like you belong everywhere and nowhere at the same time, you're in the right place.
So let's start with a big one. How many places have you lived?
I've lived in 5 countries for various amounts of time. I lived in Uganda from 0 to 2. And from 2 to 2.5, I lived in the US, moved back, and was in Uganda from when I almost turned 3 until I was 10. At 10, I moved to Switzerland. At 13, I moved to Ethiopia. And at 14, I moved to France.
Oh my gosh, that's a lot of countries.
And you too, Shira, where have you lived?
I have lived only in France. I moved to France when I was 6, and today I'm 15. So it's been 9 years. And yeah, unlike Elsie, I only moved once.
And living in all these countries gives us a big question of what home means to us. And
Absolutely.
So what does home mean to you, Shira?
I think home for me is where my family is. I just think it's generally where my family is and where my friends are. I feel like home can be anywhere if my family's there. So, yeah. How about you?
I feel the same way, that home is where my family is, but I would specify that more to where my parents are, because right now all my siblings are basically all over the world. And it's just along the way of moving to so many countries, I picked up a habit of not saying I'm going home. I'd rather just say I'm going to my house, or yeah, so even if I say I am going home, I would immediately correct myself, say I'm going to my house, because it doesn't really, no house that I really live in feels like home since I first moved.
That's really interesting. Okay, so I have a fun question.
What is something irrational you miss from each time you moved?
I think something funny or like irrational is I really missed cereal. I had this really specific cereal that I liked growing up, and when I moved here, I couldn't find it, and that was, I don't know, I really missed it, and it was really hard for me. But how about you?
I think when I moved, I don't really remember the moves before this, but when I moved to Switzerland, I think something that I really missed the most was my kitchen set and all my toys. I had this like plastic kitchen set and I loved it so much. And it's weird that this would be something that pops into my head when I think of something that I really missed. But it is. I just really missed how we all used to like be there with all my brothers, all my friends. The kitchen set was like a really like integral part of my like childhood experience, and I don't have that anymore.
Wow.
The other times I moved, I don't think there's been anything that distinct that I really missed though. So, Shira, do you ever feel like you shouldn't belong in one of your host countries more than you do in your own passport country?
Wow, I have to be honest. I do not know how to answer that question. I really do not know. I feel like I do belong in France, but sometimes it can be a little bit hard. For example, when something important happens in Israel, like a war or something like that, people in France won't understand it and won't understand what I'm going through. And then when something happens in France, I think I don't really care or wonder about it. So I guess I do feel like I belong in France, but at the same time I don't. It's a really complex question for me.
I personally feel like I belong most in Switzerland, which makes me feel bad, what I kind of feel bad to say, because I lived in Uganda for 9 years and I lived in Switzerland for 3, And it just feels like, why do I feel more connected, more involved, and more like appreciated in a country I'm not even from than somewhere I lived for 9 years, and that's in my DNA. So it makes me feel bad for being from that, for feeling like this.
Yeah.
And it's like nobody would really understand why I feel like I belong more in that place.
But you just do.
But I just do.
Yeah.
And it's just something that I feel that I can't really explain very well.
Wow. I have a very interesting question to ask you. So, have you ever experienced culture shock when visiting your home country?
Yes, I have, like, really immensely.
Oh, wow.
Because it feels like when we were reading a book, we came across the term hidden immigrant, which means you look like everybody else, but you don't think like everybody else.
Yes.
So I would look like everybody else, but whenever they talked about all these different things, I have very different opinions from everybody else. And I just feel out of place from everybody else. And honestly, I felt like this my whole life, because growing up I went to an American school, so that put me under the context of a cross-culture kid, an educational cross-culture kid, because I was not studying in my own culture, and I'd always felt different because of that, because I got a completely different style of education than everybody else.
Yeah.
And English was the language we spoke at home, which is a choice my parents made. So I'd always felt different. I'd always felt disconnected. But now at least it's like I have a reason to feel disconnected because I actually left. Because I've actually lived somewhere else.
Yes.
So how do you feel about this question?
I think I've also experienced culture shock. It was a few years ago when COVID started, and I hadn't visited Israel for like 2 years, and I came and I visited it, and I just saw how different the culture is compared to the French culture. Like, the Israeli people were so loud and very noisy, and it was just like very different from the French culture. And I think that was like a complete shock to me, but I also found it like so fascinating that there's so many like that there's two completely different cultures, and I really found it fascinating. But yeah, I definitely experienced culture shock. And now let's get into a little positive energy. What is the greatest thing you've received from the experience of being a TCK?
I think being bilingual and
Absolutely.
having a lot of different cultural experiences, so I know how to adapt. So I'm very adaptable to different situations, and I know how to deal with people from many different backgrounds because I've lived with people from all around the world. I know how customs work. I know a lot about the different cultural traditions and the small nuances that are hard to pick up on. But as a TCK, when you're around a lot of different cultures, you can see the similarities between a lot of different people.
No, I completely agree with you. Yeah, I think being a TCK, you're really open to different cultures, and you really understand that there's so many different cultures, and it's amazing. And another thing that I find amazing being a TCK is you're very open to change. You're just willing, it makes you open-minded and open to experience, and I think that's a great thing that you need in your life. But definitely languages, being able to speak so many languages, it's great. You can communicate anywhere, wherever you want.
And also being able to, even if it is just one language, knowing the difference in what words mean.
Absolutely.
And how words are perceived, like with the word sorry. In African cultures, it's for apologies, but it's also for comfort. Like if a baby was crying, you'd be like, oh, sorry. But in other cultures, it's not like that.
Yeah.
And I, as a TCK, would know that, okay, I'm in France right now. If I said sorry to somebody, if they fell down, they would ask me, they'll tell me it's not your fault. Why are you saying sorry?
Yes.
But I know that if somebody fell down and I was in Africa, or they would understand, they'd be like, oh yes, like that's like a comforting word.
Yeah.
And that's something that a lot of people would not regularly
yeah.
pick up on.
No, yeah. But yeah, of course there's a lot of struggles and difficult things being a TCK, but I think there are a lot of, amazing things
Related
from being
to
a
it.
TCK. But another thing that I want to get into is unresolved grief. So during our studies and researching, we have found that a lot of TCKs have unresolved grief.
Yeah, we've seen that a lot of TCKs, we all lose our worlds in one plane trip.
Yeah.
And we're never really given time to grieve.
To process it, to grieve.
Time to process it and time to understand what we've lost. And most people never really get that time and are forced to move on.
And yeah, that's I think a really big thing, and it's really important to resolve that big traumatic amazing thing that happened to you, because just in one plane ride immediately, like, your whole life is like changed.
And another thing is that mostly when, like us, when you come from developing countries or third world countries and you move to a first world country, people expect you to be so grateful for the opportunities you have, and you are.
But sometimes
so you're not allowed to feel sad.
And that's so wrong, because we are sad.
We're sad that we left our whole world.
We left our family, we left our friends, we left everything.
And we're not allowed to be sad because this is such a great opportunity that most people would die for.
Yes, absolutely. But yeah, no, it comes with goods and bads.
Yeah. But as we're growing older, we're learning more and more about what it is like to live as a TCK.
And it's really helped us. And I think our researching this and talking to people about being a TCK really helps you to resolve that trauma and to open up and to understand
what you're going
through. Yes, absolutely.
It also helps us understand our emotions, and that we're not ungrateful for feeling these things, and that our feelings are not invalid, and that they are actually
valid. They are completely valid.
And that they actually mean something.
This has been such a deep dive into a TCK experience. And honestly, we could talk about this forever.
And we will, because we're just getting started. If you're a TCK, we'd love to hear your stories too. Make sure to follow the TCK Diaries for more episodes, and we'll catch you next time.